Why?
In 115 for object oriented program, Scotty had to cancel a midterm because so many people were sick.
Oh.
Last Wednesday, she only had like 5 people show up.
So I believe it's taping now. Flu has been bad, although I'm not sure everyone that's missing is flu.
Yeah.
All right. So are we ready? Do I usually zoom this? How is? Oh, first I have to turn it on. No, my internet just went away again. No, actually, that's local. That's inside the box. That should be all right.
We can still do B in there, right?
Yeah. That's what I said. There's nothing. The only thing you can't do today if you don't have internet is turn in your assignment. Or take notes if you're taking them online. But okay, I guess we'll start. You guys have questions before we get going? Yeah. When does registration start?
The 12th.
The 12th, so next week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to do some comments here. I think I'm usually zoomed. Is this big enough to see from the back? Probably not. I mean, I haven't typed much, but. Why does the magnifier look different? All right, so I'm going to just describe what we're going to do. We've already created, yeah. It's back? Yeah. It's okay. I'll just go with the wireless for now, because if I don't, it'll disrupt it, and then I'll come back. We've already created a few tables, but I'm going to, we're going to make a couple more tables just to go through that process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two community assist. And what I just sort of want to describe what we're going to do. I'm going to add, so I'm going to say that they want to start tracking events and fundraisers and things like that. So I'm going to create a table called event type, whoops, which should be spelled right, which will list just the types of event. Is it a fundraiser? Is it an information session? Is it, you know, what kind of thing? It's just a lookup table. And then I'm going to do event, and then I will do like attendance for those events. So we might call it event attendance. And I'm also going to let comments. I'll just call it event comments, so that people can comment on the events. I was trying to think, is there anything else?
Comments.
What?
Even comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm missing. Well, they could be even comments. No odd comments allowed. I'm just going to look at my diagram that I drew to see if I'm leaving anything out. So we got event type. Oh, one thing I'll add, because they could all be at different places, I'm going to do a location too. Okay. So we're going to add these tables. And the thing is that they're going to have relationships, and some of them event will, every event will have an employee responsible for it, so there'll be a link to employee. The attendance will be linked to people, right? And then the comments will be linked to people too, and dates. And I just want to show you how to set up these tables. You've seen a bit of it, but I will go through it a little bit more formally. Some of these we're going to set the keys and primary keys and defaults and things in the table, and some of them we'll do by alter table, right? And there's no, Alter table allows you to change it after the fact. Some people do all their keys and all the constraints and stuff as alter tables, because then it doesn't matter what order you make the tables in. If you do the primary keys and foreign keys inside the table structure, it matters what order you do it in. Does that make sense? I'm going to do it both ways. I mean, I'm not going to do everything both ways. I'm going to do some tables one way and some tables another. Also, if you haven't seen this, so I'm just going to, you can use this kind of comment in SQL Server. The dash dash is the one-line comment. This is the multi-line comment, which is the same as the multi-line comment in most programming languages. You don't need all of these. Those are just decorative. You just need those. All right, so let's add the event type table. When you create a table, it literally is create table. And we do want to use community assist. Good mind, because you know where they'll go if I don't?
To the master.
They'll go into the master, which doesn't hurt the master, but it's a bit weird having all that clutter in there. So I'm going to do use community assist. And we'll run that just to make sure I'm there. I missed. All right. So we're in community assist. I'll do create table event type. And you begin and end with the parentheses. My instincts, having done C# programming forever, is to put curly braces there, but they are not curly braces, they are parentheses. Serve the same function, though. They're showing the block of the command here. So I'm going to do event type key. I'm going to make it an integer. I'm going to make it an identity, which is an auto number. And the 1, 1 just means you start at 1 and or count by ones. You could start at 1,000 if you wanted and count by ones. You could count by whatever you want. Does that make sense? The other thing I'm going to do is I will make it a primary key. So this is the easiest way to do it, and I usually do it this way. The one caveat I will say is that we are not naming our primary key. So when it runs, when it creates this table, it will name the primary key constraint for us. If you ever want to drop that primary key, you're going to have to look up the name. And typically what it does is it'll say event type primary key and give it a long random number after. Whereas if we named it, we could just name it. I'll show you later how to name it. I'm going to do a comma there. And then I'm going to, we'll do the next thing, which will be the event type name, I guess. And I'll do varchar, or in varchar. Let's make it in varchar. I prefer in varchar. 255, and I'll make it not null. That means it's required. Right? You guys know in varchar?
It's just, yeah, just like whatever you put in is what it is.
Yeah, it's a variable character, any characters. Numbers are included if you want, but you're not treated as numbers. The in is because it's Unicode. Now, if you're doing MySQL or something, it doesn't distinguish between Unicode and non-Unicode. It's just all Unicode. But SQL Server does. And varchar is ASCII and in varchar is Unicode. Same thing, though. And it's variable character. It'll collapse to the width of the actual term you entered. If you are really worried about processor speed, you might use just char. Because then it's fixed width. And so you don't have to calculate the length of the field, but you probably end up wasting disk space. Did you have a question?
Yes, sorry. If you select a varchar and only use ASCII
Well, so the way that Unicode works is its first 255 characters are ASCII. And they're stored in 1 byte, just like ASCII. So the next, 32,000 characters are stored as 2 bytes. And it keeps stepping up. So if you only use ASCII characters, even if you do in varchar, it'll be the same size as if you've done varchar. You don't lose anything. But if you ever want to enter in Cyrillic or Greek or Chinese or Japanese, you might want to include the in varchar allows you to do that.
There's no need to hard code ASCII for performance reasons.
I can't think of any good performance reason for hard coding. If you're never going to enter anything but an English character, it doesn't matter much. There is a default. So when you set up the database, there's a default in it in terms of what's called the collation, and that's the language group. So like you can choose American English, which means that everything will be in dollars, right, when you do money. And it doesn't really spell check, but it's basically it'll accept the way Americans enter dates and things like that. If you do it as British English, then all of your money terms will be in pounds. And, there are other things that will change. Again, it doesn't spell check for you, but, and then if you could enter it in something entirely different, if you wanted it in Japanese or something. So I'm just going to do event type description, which is different than the name, I guess. But the other thing is that the max size for these is 255. There is such a thing as invarchar max. You don't want to use it generally. Invarchar max will let you enter up to 3 gigs into that field, but they aren't stored in the table. They're stored elsewhere, and all that's stored in the table is a pointer to them. But if you really need to enter large amounts of text or store documents, you could do that. Okay, so that's my whole table here. And I'm actually going to create it. You can actually, as you probably saw from the script where we created community assist, you can run them in a stream once you've written them. But I'm going to run them one at a time just to show a couple of things. So when I executed, it says the command was completed successfully. If we go into databases, community assist, and am I in the right? Yeah, but this has Vincent's. It'll work for today, but it is not the one I usually use for this. Vincent's doesn't exist in my one I usually use for here. It's okay, it has community assist. It doesn't have Metro Alt. Right, notice. Anyway, under tables, and if we go down, this one was called event type. Yeah, so there's event type. If it's not there, if you right click on tables and do refresh, it should be there. Now, one of the things I wanted to show about this event type, so we've got the columns and it shows that. Notice it has a PK for the primary key. Under the keys, this is the name of the primary key, right? That's a pain if you need to drop it sometime. And there are times when you need to drop primary keys. Sometimes when you're blending things or moving them into a data warehouse or something, you might want to remove all the primary keys. When you're doing a bulk load, you might want to for a while. To do that, you'd have to drop this, and this is not a intuitively easy way to name the key. Yeah, if you have this environment, right? The other thing is that you can also, there are some system queries that will bring up the keys. But you can also, let's do another table. So let's do the, so we got this. So I think the next one is location, right? So I'm going to do create table location. And again, the open and close parentheses.
Do you need to alias that since it's showing up as a reserved
Oh.
word?
So maybe do we want to name it something other than location? What else would we name it?
Event location?
What? Event location will work. Yeah, it's a reserved word. You know, it's actually smart enough
Can we
to.
just put it in square brackets?
You can do that also. It's usually smart enough to figure out context, but it's still not great to name things after reserved words. So let's do the location is actually, I'm going to do event location key. And we'll do int identity 1, but I'm going to reserve the declaring the primary key till the end. And I'm going to do, so I guess event address. Or event location.
Yeah, like the name. Wouldn't you want the name of?
Yeah, you probably would. I have that in my, so let's do that up above it. I always go for the 255 since it collapses to the size. I would probably make this not null. Anything you don't make not null, you can leave blank. And one of the decisions you have to make when you're designing these is what is required and what is not. So, and then let's just do event location city. And I'm going to do something here. I'm going to add a default. And what that does is if you don't enter anything, it's in Seattle, right? And we'll do the same with actually, let's do this one as in-car. So we only want 2 character state. And the default is Washington. And then I will do a zip code. If it was you're doing out of country ones, you might want more than zip. You might want just postal code. But I'm going to do in-car. The biggest one is 11. Does that include the dash?
I think it's 10 with the dash.
10 with the dash?
Yeah,
I think
it's
it's
5,
followed by
5 and 4
Yeah, so it's
with a
4
dash.
digits,
So
it's
let's
dash.
do it as 10. And I'm not going to give it a, but we'll make it not null. Okay, so we've got everything in there for the location. But what I want to do is now make the primary key. So I'm going to do constraint. And if you think about keys or constraints, does it make sense to you why keys might be constraints? They limit what a field can do.
The hierarchy of the flow.
Yeah, well, so they limit what it can be
Yeah.
too. So when you do a primary key constraint, it means that it has to be unique, right? The other thing, a foreign key limits the content of the foreign key to something that is in the primary key in another table. You can't enter a value that isn't in the other one. It also causes other constraints, yeah?
Very quick thing, Does default assume not null as well, or we just have to-
Default, there's not a null isn't even a possibility, right? Because if you don't enter
Oh, 'cause
something,
it
it'll
will
just put,
default to that.
yeah,
So,
Okay, so only you erase it.
yeah. So if you type something in, it'll go with that. But if you don't type anything in, it'll just put Seattle. So it'll never be null.
No, it won't let you accept like reversing the blind answer.
You know, I'm curious. If you wrote the word null, it would probably do a null. You know, if the city was unknown and you wrote, I think a null would overwrite this. But usually the effect of a default is that it will never be an empty field, basically. And you should be careful with defaults. Because sometimes, like with a numeric value, I mean, you could do default equals 0 for a numeric value, but a 0 isn't the same thing as an unknown value. And it can affect your sums and your averages in ways that you might not want. Because sum and average ignore nulls, but they don't ignore zeros. Does that make sense?
0 is a value.
If 0 is a value. I'm going to do PK event location. And what this is my name for the constraint. The advantage of doing it this way is that I get to name it. It doesn't have that long string of numbers at the end. Key constraint values have to be unique, not only in the table, but in the database. Does that make sense? You can't use the same, like foreign keys, that gets to be a little harder. But the foreign key name has to be, constraint names have to be unique in the entire database, not just in the table. So we're going to say it's a primary key. And then I have to say which field is going to be the primary key because we're a bit removed from it right now. So I'm going to say event location key. And that should do it for here. Again, I'm going to make it now so we can look at some of the effects of that. If it doesn't work, it's typically you're missing a comma somewhere. So let's look at, now again, in the tables, it's not going to be there until I refresh. Okay, so now there's an event location.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Yeah, and so when you look at this, it has all of those. For keys, it has event location, which makes a much more sense. And it has the two defaults, which I didn't name. Now, I could have named them in much the same way that I did this. I could have put a constraint, put a default and things in there. But right now, it's default, df, event location, event, and then a number. Those constraints, though, aren't as often dropped. You still might want to drop a constraint, but a default constraint. But. Does that make sense? When you're first creating a database, I mean, you should go through the whole process that you did in 220, where you actually build out the diagram. Even for this little thing, I actually scribbled a diagram. Just to kind of get it in my head what I wanted to do. Because but it's a good idea to kind of plan these out. Notice that these don't require a go between them. You could put a go between them, but you don't. For some reason, it doesn't require it, unlike create view or create function. So
perhaps the most frustrating thing about that assignment
was the
like
goes.
when it wouldn't work, and I'm like, wow. Oh.
But it should work without the go if you just select the thing. It just has an underline. But the goes, again, and in another environment, if you were doing semicolons, it would go after the parentheses. Right, that this is the end of the command. All right, so the next table is going to be the event itself, and this one will have a couple of foreign keys in it. So I'm going to show you a couple ways to make foreign keys, and then we'll do the attendance and the comments. Is it making sense? This isn't hard. One of the things that's hardest is figuring out the data types. You might notice that most of them are in-car or in-bar car. Ints are good for auto numbers, although int does have some limits. It's a 32-bit number, so you might want to do big int if you're going to get into big. Big int is a 64-bit number, which goes into the trillions, whereas this only goes into the low billions. So, all right, so let's do another create table event.
That's also a reserved word.
Yes, it is. What do we want to call it? Well, they're not all for donations.
Event, event,
Why?
event,
Event. How about community assistant
There you go.
or CA?
You gotta keep the event, the prefix.
What?
You gotta keep the prefix. to the event.
Yeah.
How about just event name?
Well, but that's going to be a field, right? I wouldn't name the table the same thing as a field inside of it,
How about event description?
which
That's
is
gonna be
another
its own
field
table,
inside
yeah.
of it.
Ah,
I mean, if you can think of a good name.
event.
Yeah, somebody said that. If you want to do that, you could also
For class.
do this. But whenever you use it, you're going to have to do that. There are a lot of reserved words that are very painful because you want to use them. You want to use you might want to do date as a field name, but it's a reserved word, right? You can put it in square brackets. You might
Like
want
you'll
to,
want to use date as a field in this table.
yeah.
So you know when it happened.
So transaction is what I wanted. Not transaction is a reserved word. A lot of people want to do transaction. State is a reserved word because of the you can check on the state of some process, right? There are a lot of reserved words that would make good field words. And again, you can do it, just put them in square brackets. It's a bit of a pain, though. So we'll just do CA event, which is, again, if naming is difficult, and probably decisions on names should be made with thought, not in the spur of the moment. But because when you deal with the data later, naming conventions can really help or really screw you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do CA event key. Although you could just, if you want, because everything's going to be, we could just ignore the CA and the field names. No? Okay. Consistent is something I almost never am.
At least you're consistently consistent.
Yeah, I try. I'm actually just going to do primary key here. So, and in the event we'll have, I think I had date and time, and then
What don't you need
probably a name too. And I had a start, an end time, a type, a location, and an employee. So let's give it a name.
Control H, my friend.
Probably not null for this. All right, and then I'm going to do CA event, can't do this. Oh, what?
You really want to add a tab after something.
Oh, event. I think I have a touch of dyslexia at times. What? So CA event date, for which I'm just going to do date. And I'm not going to do a, because you probably wouldn't be entering it on the moment. You could do like a default equals get date, but that's not, you're not likely to have it occur on the very date that you're entering it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to do CA event time. And I'm just going to do time. Actually, it probably should do start time and end time. Actually, would you want to leave these null? It depends on when you want to enter them. You might enter them before
if
you
you're like,
know.
we're planning this event, but we haven't quite decided what time it's going to be, and then you can come back and the time and not.
I guess start time would be not known, but sometimes the end time would be flexible.
Well, sometimes even the start time, like if you entered the event before you knew, it depends. That's a business rule that you could decide on. It's not really a database rule. Now, if you don't put not null, it's nullable by default. Does that make sense? It's always nullable by default. You can put null if you really just want to be clear, but you don't ever have to write null because that's the default. I will leave it though. And then we'll do the end time, which sounds ominous. So that'd be time. I did start time again. I've been watching too many Marvel stories on Netflix. Although I just started Altered Carbon. It's actually pretty good. If you like the Blade Runner kind of noir kind of thing. In a really weird future. Okay, so in time, we want the location ID or location key. Except what did we call it? Event location key?
Event
We already
location.
had a temp location.
Yeah, but we need to know what location this is at.
Oh, okay.
So this would be an int. And here's one way you can do that. You can do foreign key references event location event location. I'm going to break that line and tab it in. Oh, I did a cap lock. So that's one way to do a foreign key. Again, this is letting it name your foreign key. I'm also, everything needs an employee key.
Maybe also an event type key.
Oh yes, an event type key. Let's do it next. And again, you could do this. I'm going to do this one this way. And I'm going to do the employee key. I'll do a different way. So I'm going to do int foreign key. This needs a comma after it. So it references event type. So basically, when you have a foreign key, I'll break this just to be consistent so they both look kind of alike. You have a field, but foreign key always references another table and the primary key in that table. It doesn't have to, if this is not a primary key, it'll give you an error. Because if you can only make a foreign key against a primary key. Right? The foreign key constraint requires that the thing it's being constrained by is the primary key in the other table. So I'm going to do the employee key a little bit different. Now, the employee key comes from the employee table that's already there. I'm going to let it be null, even though it's a foreign key, because you may not know what employee is assigned to it initially. And then I'm going to do a comma there. And this is the other way you can do a foreign key. I'm going to do constraint FK employee. And what I usually do, so I'm going to do like FK employee event, right? Because we're bringing in the employee to the event. Again, these have to be unique.
This would be employee CA, right? Because it's the name of the table.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
I mean, this is a name, it's as arbitrary as any name you want to do, except it has to be unique in the database.
Okay.
If you want CA event for consistency, you could.
Now, wait a second, employee key has got a, one of those funky names. It doesn't have the.
No, I think employee key is employee key.
Employee key, yeah.
No, I was looking at the key section.
Oh, yeah, but we don't have to refer to the key name, just the
Oh,
field
okay,
name.
okay.
And this is, and then this one, so this is just a field that we're putting in here, and it doesn't have to have the same name as employee key either if you really don't want it to. I think it makes it logically, it makes it easier to follow if the foreign keys have the same name as the primary key, but there is no rule that they have the same name. The only rule is they have to have the same data type. Does that make sense? So when I do this, I've given this a name, and then I have to say foreign key with 2 words. And I have to say which field because it's not on the same line. So I have to say employee key. And then I'm going to break this again and go in a little bit, trying to get it into the same place as the other one. I think that's 1 character off. Of course, this is 1 character off. It doesn't matter how they're, it's not Python. It doesn't care how it's lined up. I'm just.
DY on employee key at the end.
Oh, thank you. So it references employee and then employee key. So that's another way to do it. The one advantage of this is that it does allow you to name the constraints. It's a lot of typing for 1 table, but let's bring it up. I'm going to create this table. And then we'll refresh on tables. They don't show up if you don't refresh. So we've got CA event. And if I look at the columns, it has all those. Notice the foreign keys have this sideway key. The primary key has that other kind of key. I don't know, skeleton key it looks like. If I look at keys, here it has all the primary key and the foreign key. Notice the one that we named is just employee CA event. The others have their long kind of messy name. And do they appear under constraints? No, so just the keys. So we've done event type, event location, CA event. And then this one, so attendance. I think all it needs is it's kind of like a linking table between people and event. Right, one person can attend many events, and one event can have many people attending. So it's basically just a linking table. So I'm going to do create table. And I'm going to call this attendance. We could call it event attendance if you want to be consistent, since everything's been event. Okay, the two parentheses. Now this one has the dual key problem, right? Because I'm going to make it a composite key. So first of all, I'm going to do CA event key int, not null. And then I'm going to do person key int, not null. And then I'm just going to do a constraint. I guess we'll call it PK event attendance. Primary key. And it's actually really simple. I'm going to do CA event key and person key. So I'm going to break that. That's all you have to do is list them together, right? They'll both be part of the primary key. Then they're both also foreign keys. So there's a couple of ways you could do that. One, up here, I could put them as foreign keys, like we did before, just say foreign key, or I can add the two constraints. I'll add the two constraints just because I'm down here. Constraint FK CA event attend. I'm just going to do that. Foreign key. And then I'm going to just break it. References CA event. Oh, and I also have to say which key, because I'm down here. I have to say CA event key. Which one is local? This is the local field. And then I'm going to say it references the table CA event and CA event key. And then we could do the same thing for the in fact, I'm just going to copy it. We have to change the tables and things. So this one, I'm going to say maybe person attend. Person key and person key. And no comma at the end because it's the last. Does that make sense? These linking tables are a bit of a pain because you have a compound, composite key for the primary key, and then you also have two foreign key constraints. Is this making sense overall?
Yeah.
This is how, if I need to create a database and add tables, this is how I do it, because I do it in SQL. It's much more efficient. But I still design it, right? I still create a design, and often on paper, because Visio is a pain. And then I type it out, because I can do this fairly quickly, more quickly than we're going here. So I'm going to do F5. And again, if I refresh on tables, so we've got event attendance. If we look at the columns, you notice they're both primary keys, so they got that, but it's PK, FK. And if we look at the keys, it has the primary key, because there's only one primary key, but that has two fields in it, right? There's only one primary key. There always is only one primary key, but it can consist of more than one column, right? But it's a whole. If I were to have a child table for this, I would have to copy both of those fields to the child table because they're both part of the key. Does that make sense? That's one of the problems with composite keys. If you have them in a parent table, the whole compound has to move to the child table. Because there's only one key, it's a key with multiple parts. Okay. We've got one more table I'm going to do, and we're going to do it a little differently. And then we'll add all these to our diagram so you can see them if you want. Don't have to. But. So I am going to do the comment one. So let's, and you'll be happy to know that we're doing more tables in example than I'm asking you to do in your assignment. So create table, event comment. You might also know, I always name tables singular. There are other people that argue vehemently they should all be plural. It just depends.
Because the table is a collection of singular things.
And yet, but other people argue that actually it's a type. So it's a singular type that has a collection. Yeah. So, I mean.
I feel like it maybe depends a little bit on the application of the database. But
yeah, but it's really an argument about whether you're looking at them as entities or as collections. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I do them singular, but this one I'm not going to put any keys in. All right, but I'm going to show you how to add them. So I am going to, the first one will be event comment key int identity. And an identity can't be null, but I'm going to put not null there anyway. Partially because when we create the key outside the table, it will complain if it thinks it's nullable in any way. So, and then we've got what have I got? We got the key. Oh, so we want the event key. And I'm going to make it not null too. And then we've got, it's an event CA key, right?
Yeah.
Or CA event.
Key.
And there'll be a person key doing the comment. And then I'm going to do the comment date. Guess it's event comment date. And then the comment text, whatever they want to do.
Could you could default the event comment date field to get date.
You could, but I'm going to do that in an alter table.
Gotcha.
So you could put all the keys in here, right? I want to show you how to do them outside the table. And I'll do invar_char. Do you want, when you think of comments, Are you thinking that they would only be limited to 255 characters? Or do you want to let them write essays?
Essays.
Essays? In that case, you would do like a max.
No, I say make it 255 because it's too much for me.
I want something in between more than 255 and an essay.
Well, so you can't have more than
Don't make it
250.
a mile, kid.
Your choices are 255 or max.
I just want to see
The max.
I want to know.
I just feel like 255 is maybe a little constraining, right?
Right. But if you do max, what happens, even if you're under 255, because it's a max, it's not going to store it in the table. It's going to store a pointer to it and put it later in the file, in the data file. Which means that you can't query the content. You can retrieve the content, but you can't query the content of the field. Does that make sense? Because it's not in the table. Yeah. Not that this matters a whole lot. I don't know if I ever explained, but no column, actually no row in SQL Server can be larger than 14K. And that's because it's the way it stores data underneath. It creates something called a page. And what the page has is it has a header that says what row it's in. What row, what table. The header gives some location information. Then it has the data from the row. And then it can have multiple rows, but no row can extend beyond a page. Right? So one page can contain multiple rows, but no one row can be bigger than a page. And a page is 14K. Why? I don't know for sure why it's 14K, but that's what it is. Pages are stored in extents, which are 8 pages. And then a table could, have many extents in it. None of which really matters except for the limit of 14K in it. You can actually create a row where you'll get an error that it's beyond the length. So, but you don't ever get that with max, even though I can put 3 gigs here, because all it's going to do in here is put a pointer to where the file actually is. So if you wanted to do like big data, you'd have to do programming code and parse the strings or something, because the SQL Server won't let you query the content of the field if it's not stored in the table. Does that make sense?
Big data analytics content.
It could, yeah. So I just wanted to say there's trade-offs for Max. We'll leave it because I don't care a whole lot on this database. And it's probably good to see Max. Again, in terms of retrieving the data, no big deal. It'll bring it back, right? So if you do select all from this, you'll see the comment text, no matter how big it is. But you won't be able to search inside of that for values.
I guess if you wanted to make it so people could leave big comments like that, but also so that, I'm thinking like if you add a field that's like, 1 through 5, rate this thing.
Well, you could
be like, if it's 1 and 2, you could be like, if it's 1 or 2, pull it back out.
Actually,
so
let's.
I want to see the critical.
Let's
if
add.
people are critical of it, or I want to see if people get feedback in that way. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Let's do. Let's do a rating, because there's a type of constraint that I'd like to show you for that too. We could do it as a max. Comments actually work really good in NoSQL databases, but we'll let this go. So they could write a novel if they really, really hated it or really loved it, right? 3 billion bytes is like half of, probably all of Dostoevsky. All the big thick novels, they could all fit into that. Yeah, I know the huge novels are in the megabytes. So if you got 3 gigs, you got it made. You could put half of your, probably you could put most of your library. So I don't know why they give you that much room, but what? There are some blob data types. So this is like a text blob, but there's a var binary, and there's a var binary max. And a var binary max is actually what you would use if you want to store pictures, or if you wanted to store music, or if you wanted to store anything actually that's binary. And so any kind of, you could put whole programs in there probably. There's some debate among database people whether it's better to store such things in the database or just store a string to where to locate them on file. And there are good arguments on both sides. It's actually a little faster if you store them in the database, like pictures and stuff, but your database becomes rapidly gigantic. Microsoft, although there are many databases that are bigger than it now, but Microsoft some years ago advertised their terabyte database. It was a SQL Server database that had basically what the games would call tiles for the surface of the earth, kind of like Google Maps before Google Maps. And so if you typed in a location, latitude, longitude, they would return a tile of that, for that map. Tile being a picture of that thing. But it was a terabyte, of data, and a lot of databases are bigger than that. Some are approaching the petabyte size. And with a SQL Server database, the way you handle data that big is you just keep buying bigger and bigger hard drives. You can break up the file, the data file, so that it can be on multiple disks, because they don't make petabyte disks yet. But they do make terabyte disks, right? So anyway, all of that to side, let's make this table. Okay, so this one doesn't have any keys yet, and it's perfectly happy with that. Another thing I will tell you that I probably shouldn't is that there are people who don't put keys or constraints in their databases, because you can do the link, you can do the joins, you can do all of that without actually declaring any of these foreign keys. The advantage of that is that you can enter data in any table at any time. You don't have to enter them sequentially. The disadvantage of that is that you're wide open to garbage. You're wide open to people entering, like if it's sales that have no customer, detail. You can end up with a database that is useless because it has so much garbage. So the constraints help control what they call referential integrity. The relational structure helps guarantee that all your data is internally consistent. All right, so this would work as is, but I wanted to show you another way to add these constraints is with alter table. Remember how we did alter view? It's a little different with alter table. You don't have to repeat the whole table structure. So I'm going to do alter table event comment, and I'm going to add a primary key. Event comment key. So this by itself, if I run it, says it was successful. If I refresh event comment and then open that up and look at the columns, it now has a primary key, right? So The event key and the person key are foreign keys. So it's really pretty much the same thing. Alter table, event comment. You have to say what table you're altering. I'm going to add constraint. I'm going to call this FK CA event. And we don't need a capital V, although the case doesn't matter. Comment foreign key, and then I have to actually do a parentheses in what field that is. CA event key, and in references, CA event, CA event key. So just like before, except we're altering the table to add it. I don't know, this may not work, whether I can do.
Yeah, you put the, one shot.
So I don't think you can do the primary key, but maybe. Let's do this person comment. It isn't happy there. So it isn't happy there. I wonder if I take away the word add though.
No, take out the comma. The comma.
No, the comma is necessary.
Can you take out the?
I fixed it. I took out the add. You only do add once.
Well, that makes sense.
This comma is necessary. And that worked. So let's look at the, I'm going to refresh that table again. And it has the two foreign keys. I don't know if we could have added the primary key too, maybe. Might have been able to do it in one sweep.
Seems like if you can add, multiple foreign keys at
You
once,
should be able
just,
to add the constraint too. You might have been able to add all the constraints. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to add a couple of defaults. So you could experiment with that. I think you could probably add constraints.
Probably just a good rule of thumb. One command per key.
Well, it makes it easier to read. Although when you're adding, this one makes some sense together.
Yeah.
Right, doing the two foreign keys together.
Just its own line and dropped constraints. So I'm going to hit it just for my own visual.
Oh.
Like add the constraints.
Oh, you did like.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine too. Whatever makes it readable for you. That's one nice thing about this is you can, break it however makes sense. All right, so I'm going to add a couple of other things. So we've added the foreign keys. Let's see if we can do a default on the date. And then I may do a couple of other things that aren't part of that, but let's do add.
Hey Steve, can we take a break, please?
Oh, sure.
It's hot.
All right, let's do, we're close to done, but you want to do it, finish it, or take your break?
Well, I'm in one voice, so if the jury wants to keep going, I'll keep going.
It's up to you guys. What do you want? So there's only a couple more to do. Let's do it and then we'll take a break. It shouldn't take more than 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to add an alter table. It always starts that way. Event comment. add constraint. If you want, like you can do. And I'm going to call it DF comment date default. And I think I need to here do comment date get date. See if that's happy with that. Is it equal? I haven't done doesn't like get date there. What is it not like? Why does it not like get date? So equal isn't part of it.
Just try default parentheses get date parentheses.
Well, that one shouldn't work though. How does it know what column to do it on?
But do the comment date gets the default
Oh, you know what? It's a comment date.
before the default.
That might work actually. Oh, you know what? I haven't told. Well, I was thinking. That probably won't work either. I might have to look this up because I don't remember. I don't want to spend time on it though. Let's just do this. You guys can always do this too. I'm just going to do default constraint. Why is it not typing? Constraint. It's all frozen. T-SQL. T-SQL is Microsoft's brand. It's transaction SQL. Alter table. Yeah, I know how to do it that way. Oh, probably it's alter column. Well, let's see.
One alter column, and then there's also default get date for.
Yeah. What did you find?
So there's name of the constraint.
Right.
Get date. For.
Oh, 4. That might work. Let's go back. And with comment date, that actually works. Thank you. You were faster. Oh, no, it doesn't like that.
Is it event comment date instead of just comment?
Yeah, I think it's event comment date. Isn't it?
Oh, it's event comment date.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And that worked. All right, so just a couple more, and then we're done. Alter table event comment. I'm going to put a constraint on the rating, event rating. Add constraint. And I'm going to do check. Well, let's do CK rating, check. And what we want to do is check that event rating. Is that what I named it?
Event rating, yeah.
Between 1 and 5. And I think You want 4? What this will do is it'll make it so you can only enter values between 1 and 5. So a check constraint puts a limit on a field in terms of its values. So I'm thinking of 5-star. If you did 4-star, you can do 4. I don't care. I'm actually not going to put data in these tables. The last 2 things. You didn't like yours? What do you got? Add constraint.
Yeah, event rating.
Check. So look at what you've named here. Put above. Just put type. So you might. So here's if you don't have event rating. There's 2 good things. Actually, that's really good. So I want to show you how to add and drop a column, and then that's the last 2 things. So I'm going to alter table event comment. Actually, let's just do this. Now, if you don't have that column, I'm going to drop column event rating, although it may not let me. All right. I can't do it because I have to drop the constraint. So first of all, I'm going to alter table comment. And I'm going to drop. So drop constraint CK rating. And this needs to be an actual word. So I'm going to drop the rate that, and then I can drop the column. Okay, and then I'm going to add it back in. So I'm going to add, weirdly you don't use the word column, so I'm going to add event rating. And I'm going to make it an int. So I'm going to add the column back in. And then I'm going to add the constraint back in. So that's how you drop a constraint. That's how you drop a column. This is how you add a column. Oh. And then you can do the constraint. And that's it. So you can have a break. So what I will do is I'll post all of this. It was hopefully making a video. And I'll post those. We do not have class on Thursday, but the room may be open. I don't know. We'll see if we can get it open if you want it. So that's creating tables. This is really, if you're building a database, right? And if you need to correct tables, the alter tables are really good for correcting tables, making if you forgot a field or you really find there's a field in there you don't need anymore. If you want to add constraints after the fact, these are all really good ways to change it. Other people also, when they build the tables, because these have to be built in a certain order if you add the foreign keys and primary keys in the table. A lot of people just create the tables and then do a list of all the primary keys and foreign keys and all that later as alter tables. Because then it doesn't matter what order you did the tables in.
One teacher just discovered if you have a one-line comment and you have a HTML somewhere in there, it will still recognize it. But you control click to go to that link inside the program.
Oh.
Keep typing your comment afterwards.
Huh.
So we need a link to it.
Oh, that's a good idea. So you do it as a comment and then an HTTP.
Yeah, but I didn't realize it actually recognizes it. I'll just put this thing in and copy and paste it.
didn't know that. I never put a link right in the middle. Questions on any of this? As I said, you can do a break now if you want, and I will copy and paste this into the blog, and I will check on the video too.
There's just lab for the rest of the day.
Yeah, just lab for the rest of the day, and if we need on Tuesday, I'll look at where we are over the weekend. I'll give you some time to work on it if we need on Wednesday. The assignment is basically just to create 3 tables inside of Metro Alt. That makes sense. I may run this script in the right. Well, I'm going to post it here in just a second. But I may run the script in the correct virtual machine. Yeah.
So if I named something wrong, instead of FK person comment, I wrote PK person comment. Is there a way to like rename it, or you have to drop it? And then
So you can rename it over here by right-clicking and choosing rename, but in SQL you would have to drop it and then re-add it. And when you do right-click over here and rename it, that's what it does underneath, is it drops it and re-adds it within the
Oh,
thing.
that's fine.
It'll be up online in 2 seconds here.